Okay, good morning, one and all online who are joining us. We're going to watch later. Okay, so we begin a new siman this week in our shir, Rishon and Daled, which is a continuation of the topic of Shehiyah, but focuses in greater detail about the exception case, which we will spend time studying now. The topic, as the title of this siman, Dine Tavshilan Hamuchanim Erev Shabbos Ke'eli Higamer B'Shabbos. The laws of foods that are prepared from Erev Shabbos. Good morning, Linda. Oh, right. No, we started literally 20 seconds ago, so you didn't miss anything. So the laws of food that are prepared from Erev Shabbos, in order that they finish their process of cooking on Shabbos. So before we even begin the words of the Shulchan Aruch, let's just take a quick peek at the Mishnah Berurah. He gives a two-line introduction, which is really his way of saying, look at something else I wrote that introduces you to this topic. And he writes here, see where it says Afal Pi v'chulei, at the beginning of the Mishnah Berurah, about halfway down in the Mishnah Berurah's comments. Okay, he says here, I am there halacha. I'll take a look at my other work over there across the way. The Be'er Halacha Shehevenu Sugyas HaGemara Bekitzur. He says I kind of give you a little bit of the Gemara in short. Levaer Divrei HaMechaber VeHarav, in order to understand the words of the Mechaber, and the Rav here refers to the Ramah, the Elu Hashtei Seifim, when it comes to the coming to Seifim, the coming to halachot that are going to be taught. So I'm going to try to do maybe one better. We could use okay, fine. You know what? Let's use his review, which he's going to quote from the Ola Shabbos, which is a Chronish Sefer. But I have here ready on my phone the actual sugya in the Gemara in Shabbos. But maybe it'll be helpful that way everyone can follow along with the words here. So I want you to go right across to where it says Afal Pi v'chulei in the Be'er Halacha, but there's a star. We're literally actually right across the way. And he tries to give now a bit of an introduction. I don't know that we'll read all the way down through this whole thing, but this is quite the introduction. In order to explain properly the words of the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah and these coming two seifim, Akdim Divrei HaTosefes Shabbos. So I said, "Allah Shabbos." I'm going to quote he says, "I'm going to quote for you the words of the Tosefes Shabbos." Again, this work of an Achron, Shehetik Divrei HaGemara, who copies the words of the Gemara, Poskim B'Ktsara, and the decisors, in short. So here we go. Garcinan B'Shas Yudches Amud Beis, and Shabbos 18b. It says, "V'hashta the amart kolmide de kashyele zika lo megalyele." Since it is said that anything that will make it difficult, that will be very where the wind would be bad for the food. So lo megalyele, they wouldn't open up that kind of an oven. So first of all, let's like an introduction to the introduction. So what are we talking about here? So they used to when they would sometimes put food in the oven, in order to ensure that the heat really stayed in and was retained, they would cover the opening of the oven with something, and then over top of that they would, if they really wanted to ensure that no one made a mistake, because they're like, I don't want the heat to dissipate at all, I want it to cook, so they would cover it with clay. Okay, tuach batit. They would cover it with clay, and therefore, thus perhaps creating another barrier, almost a mental barrier, that like, okay, I'm not supposed to break this seal because that will be bad for the food. So, and of course, this creates an extra reminder when it comes to the laws of Shabbos. So he's talking about here that since we know that there are certain foods where the wind will be bad for it because the air will flow in and it will um, um, make it hard and therefore won't cook. Okay, you will not reveal, you will not break the seal of this oven. So this leads then to the Gemara then goes the gadja, okay, which hopefully we all know from Chad Gadja. We're talking about a kid here, a baby goat. If they say you're cooking a baby goat, Bain Sarik, and by the way, in the Gemara, if I'm not mistaken, it says shriek. So samech or sin or shin. It's a little unclear. I thought in the Gemara that I thought it was a shin, but okay. You have a shin in your edition here of the Mishnah. Yeah. Oh, okay, interesting. They have it in mind. They have the punctuation is incorrect. Okay. V'hainu eis vishorik nami shapir dami. So if you're cooking the meat of a goat, so sharik means that it is, as he says here, shetach pi hatanur, you've covered over the opening of the oven, betit saviv, with clay all around it to really ensure that nobody opens this thing. Ubein lo sarik, whether or not it is not sealed like that. Shabir dami. When you're cooking a gedi, not a problem whether or not you have the clay that is sealing the oven. Not a problem at all. I say, well, why? Why is a gedi not a problem? So let's keep reading on. Maybe by comparison, it'll make a little more sense. The varcha, if you have a barcha, which is an aiz, that's the Arabic word for an aiz, that's a goat. Visarik and the oven, if a sharik, excuse me, this is going to throw me off because it's bad punctuation. I'm going to use this edition. Oh no, here they also say sarik. Your edition, they say sharik. Interesting. Yours is the only one that's correct. Okay, I'm sorry for the printers making a mistake. If you have a goat that has this situation with the oven. No problem. Then it's fine to have on Shabbos. It can be in the oven when Shabbos starts. Cooking, the way it's not cooked yet, not a problem. So again, baby goat can be in the oven when Shabbos starts, not cooked yet, and continue to cook into Shabbos, whether or not this clay seal is there. When it comes to a goat, you need the clay seal. It seems like devar, because it's devar chavalo sharik, because if you have a goat and you have no clay, no sealing of this oven. Rav Yirmiyah, so the machlokas in the Gemara is Rav Yirmiyah asav Rav Ashi shari. Rav Yirmiyah doesn't allow you to do this situation where going into Shabbos, the goat is cooking in the oven and the oven is not sealed. And Rav Ashi says it's fine. Now, again, what's underlying all these? We're going to get to why one is okay, why one is not okay. What's
that ceiling you're talking about on the top, or talking about on the bottom where you put the coals and wood?
I think here it's in terms of accessing most important. It's good question, Steve. Here, I think they're concerned about the heat source being ruined. So it may even just be the flame of that we don't want the flame to be adjusted. It may be that the heat source is really the important part here. That was interesting.
It makes sense though to cover the top as well.
Right. As I was saying, maybe it's the whole thing. That's what I was saying. I'm not sure because on the other hand, right, the thing he's just trying to drive at here is if the air is flowing into the oven, even if the heat source underneath, it will not properly cook. So it may honestly be both. Maybe that we're talking here that you're trying to ensure, the reason that you might think what Steve is saying is because the fear here is about stoking the coals. You're going to start playing with the fire, but on the other hand, him is pointing out, well, the air though is going to get in, and that also will be a problem. And maybe both, by the way. We're going to see maybe it's both parts have to be dealt with. The Kosvua poskim and many of the poskim in their commenting on the Gemara say the Karmelan Rav Yirmiyah that we follow the opinion of Rav Yirmiyah, which is to say that it is not permitted to have a goat that is in such an oven where it's not fully sealed, and have that cooking as Shabbos begins. The Kaparach Gemara, but now let's go back. The Gemara asks the following question in response. Ula Rav Ashi Deshari, and according to Rav Ashi, who permits putting in the oven before Shabbos and it'll cook into Shabbos. V'hatnan. Ein solon basar batzalu veitza. There's a Mishnah that says you're not allowed to roast meat, onions, or eggs. Ela kadeshi yitzolun v'odio, unless they're fully roasted before Shabbos starts. The Kamishah, so that's obviously that's a very strong proof against the opinion of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, no, it's fine. You can let the meat cook into Shabbos. Not a problem at all. So the Gemara asks, but that Rav Ashi, you have a problem right here. You have a Mishnah that's beferish against what you just said.
Does it matter if it's partially cooked, this Ben Drusai business?
So once it's Ben Drusai, so what we're talking about now is such a limited case. Thank you for bringing this up. We've already established the halacha across the board. If it's already kamachal ben drusai, it's already cooked minimally, half, a third cooked. So different opinions. You don't, according to the opinion that we follow, Ashkenazim, the second, there were two opinions about shehiyah. Second opinion, which we follow, nothing to talk about. You don't have to cover the, no worry about the stoking the coals, nothing. So what's on the line here for Ashkenazim is between raw and machal ben drusai. If you have food that's in the oven at that particular state as Shabbos enters, what's the halacha? That's what's at stake here. Now we learned that if something is raw, which is basically this, before it get to machal ben drusai, so we said that it was okay. That was what we had talked about. It was in the previous siman. So now the Gemara, but also the Mishnah, the Shulchan Aruch is going to clarify further. Well, that's not in every case. Right? Not in every case, if it's raw meat, can it continue? Can you rely on this position? Because not all meats are created equal. And that's why you already see a differentiation between a kid, a baby goat. The meat is less tough. It probably takes less time to cook the meat of a baby goat as opposed to a full-grown an adult, a fully grown goat. So that's sort of what's floating on in the background here, is that not every meat is created equal, where if I leave it till the next day, then it's going to be perfectly fine. Some of them will be ready to be eaten Friday night, in which case now the fear of stoking the coals comes back, because if you play with the fire, you could be able to successfully render the food edible Friday night. So that's where the differentiation of what kind of meat we're talking about here. And we're going to see there's going to be a big differentiation also between roasting it and cooking it. Roasting it over an open fire can render food more easily ready in a faster, a quicker time period, a shorter time period, as opposed to cooking it in a liquid medium that will take longer to cook raw meat. So there's going to be a differentiation that results from that as well. So take a look here. What does the Gemara answer to the question against Rav Ashi? The Gemara answers, Hasam bevisre agumre. Over there, the case in the Mishnah where it's talking about the meat and the onion and the egg, what meat are we talking about there? That is bibisra agomre. That is when the meat is roasted directly over the coals. So we're talking about here an open fire, right? There's no liquid meat. It's like directly over fire. That's when it's not okay. So according to this read of the Gemara, right off the bat, you see that basar, ein solon basar. By the way, it's not a bad read, by the way. Ein solon, solon means to roast. That's not a stretch here. They have an answer. So when it's roasting, that's when you can't have it be not at a state of minimally edible when Shabbos comes in. But if it is a situation where it's not roasting, so again, maybe cooking in a liquid medium or something like that, according to Rav Ashi, it should be okay. Now, so Adkan, the Kosvu Mefarshim, so the Mefarshim follow up on this. This is a Gemara, okay? The Rav Yirmiyah Name Model Teirut Zelafi Amaskana. That even Rav Yirmiyah, who we paskin like, he would admit that this conclusion is correct. This differentiation that, if it's roasting over an open fire, no good. Nothing to talk about. That's what that Mishnah over there is talking about. And perhaps also, let's keep reading. But Kasva Tosas Varush, The Bitsali Iri, there we're dealing with the case of roasting. That's why if you have a ram, sorry, did I say goat before? Az is a ram, no? No, it's a goat, sorry. Azim are goat. What was that? Gedi, right? So what is Azo by itself? Isn't that the adult?
It's the adult.
Yeah, sorry. So it's the goat, sorry. Yeah. Don't worry, ram is going to come up soon also.
Ram is iron.
Right, that's going to come up in the Shulchan Aruch, yeah. So the lahachi barcha v'lo sarik, if you have a goat and it's in a situation where the oven is not sealed, asur afilu chai, even if it's raw, which we said, oh, raw is a great heter because it's not. No, asur. Why? Because it's roasting. Roasting is not going to be permitted from where you can leave it. You put some raw meat roasting over an open fire as Shabbos starts. Let's say you leave your barbecue on. As this is, I've never done this, never tried to. I actually don't even own a barbecue. But if you had a barbecue, right, and you put some meat on the barbecue prior to Shabbos starting, that to me sounds as problematic. Because that's roasting. Okay, so let's keep going. After the kedera chaisa muter liten lechatchila samach lechashecha, even though a kedera chaisa, I mean, chaisa means is raw. Kedera means a pot or a pan, right? That's okay lechatchila, as we talked about, right? If it's in other situations of food cooking, raw meat from Erev Shabbos into Shabbos, we said, of course, that's fine. But when it's roasted, that's a problem. The bitzali, below kedera, when there's no pan, there's no pot, mizbah shel mehera, the roasting will cook it very quickly. Sheyeh roy la'achila balayla, and then it will be edible at night. V'shema yechata, and perhaps you will stoke the coals in order to hasten the cooking process. Now he quotes here from the Rambam. V'hine eladas haRambam v'hamachaber. The Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch are going to say, Ikar atam deshari begedi. Why is a gedi okay? The kid goat, bein sarik, bein lo sarik. But what happened here? I thought we just said roasting is no good. Why is it going to be okay though? No matter what the scenario is, it sounds like with a gedi we're okay. Mishum she'enot tzarich rak lachamim usme'at. There you don't need a very high heat to cook this gedi, and therefore lekach lo chayshin shem yechata. We're not worried you're going to stoke the coals she'im yechata, because if you were to stoke the coals, yischarech, you will burn the meat. It will not be good from a culinary perspective. You are going to do something that will be bad for this meat. Ulekach afilu hu chutz latanur. Even if the gedi is outside of the tanur, samuch lagecham, close to the coals. We're not worried you're going to stoke the coals, mitam zeh, because of this reason, that you will burn the meat if you do this. It will not be good for it, and therefore, because you have no incentive to even, not because you're Michal Shabbos on purpose, but because our cooking instincts take precedence, because we cook 6 days a week, and we don't, and we're used to certain ways of cooking certain foods. So I'm not worried that if I have a baby goat roasting in the oven, that I'm just going to come over and start playing with the fire, because my cooking instincts kick in, and they know I absolutely also from a cooking perspective. Forget the Shabbos perspective. So therefore, we're not worried that when it comes to Shabbos about playing with the coals, that would end up happening. That's only if it's close to the coals. But if they're placed on the coals themselves. Says that again, this is not, you won't find this in the Gemara, but the Rishonim surmise that even a gedi would be not okay if it was directly over the fire, the cave directly on the fire, literally sitting on the coals. The kevan munach al hagechalem mamish, is they're actually sitting on the coals. Bevada eno choshesh al mashi yisrachech. Clearly, you don't care about burning your meat. If you're going to put it right over the coals, then you apparently like meat to be burnt. Because why? This person clearly has stated to the world, I don't care what the meat tastes like. I need to serve something to my guests, and I need to get it on the table now. Yes, Lord.
Carbon Pesach on Erev Shabbos.
On Erev, you mean on Shabbos or Erev Shabbos?
Both.
Uh-huh.
What's the sequence? What would be the sequence on Shabbos? You can have Shabbos fall on, you can have Pesach fall on Saturday night.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a whole parak.
So when are you-
Mishnah
When are you roast?
on Shabbos?
Okay.
On Shabbos.
On Shabbos, it's the one time that you could ever do such a thing. They talk about how this is it's a docha Shabbos.
So,
Right, they would do this, the whole thing, the shechita and the whole thing, which involves a lot of malachos, is permitted on Shabbos when Pesach falls out on Erev Pesach. When Pesach falls out on Saturday night. Yes, so they would be roasting it. Lamaisa, they'd be roasting. No, hold on. With the roasting though, that could wait until after Shabbos. Or the shechting of it had to be done on Shabbos, had to be done on Erev Pesach. But the roasting could be done once Shabbos is over, which is permissible.
and what would you do in the case of Erev, where it fall, where Yom falls on Friday?
Yom Tov falls on Friday night. Right.
Shafting Erev Shabbos, which is fine.
Right. My gut instinct says that they would, in that situation, they would need to have roasted it before Shabbos, though, there's no heter for this. Yeah. So I have no idea. I need to double check it. I feel like there's a Mishnah in I think it's Gates and Sultan. It's a fifth or sixth parak of Sachem that talks about how they would roast it, and they talk about the case of Shabbos. When Erev Shabbos is when Shabbos is Erev Pesach, and what's the procedure. I don't recall what happens if it falls out. Kind of like how Pesach fell out this past year, where the first night was Friday night. I'm sure it's discussed there. My gut says that they would tell you to roast it before, and then you would eat it on Pesach night. Yeah, I believe that that's the correct procedure. That's why when you make just triggering for you, when you make the bracha at the end of Magid, there is a phrase that says "min hapsachim min hazvachim," and when it falls out on Saturday, you're supposed to flip it, because of the order in which you eat the meat or something like that.
Somehow or another.
And that's what then they give a nice parish on it. It very well could be, by the way. Usually you don't play with the wording of a bracha. That's the whole shot behind Magdil and Migdol in the end of benching. That it was just somebody interpreted Rashi Tevos to mean on Shabbos you say, and I think they were just trying to say that there are different, that it was from Shmuel, yeah. Anyways, okay, so when you actually place it on the coals itself, and then you roast it from before Shabbos, if you do roast it to the point of machal ben drusai, whoa, so everything's different now. Shari gamma de rishona. Everybody says you're fine, right? So if you roasted it minimally already, and then it continues to roast, that's okay, right? If you've already reached machal ben drusai, that's not what we're talking about here. Once you get to machal ben drusai, all the problems go away. This is a little narrow window between chai, raw, and machal ben drusai. The Rishon and Gimel, the Svira Lut, the Gabi Tavshilo Mahani Kamacha Ben Rusai, Kamoshin is Bar Sham, Aval Betzli Hamunach Al Gechalim, Vale Shari, Kishu Machal Ben Drusai. Okay, the Kayagavna Vale Lo Yechate Achar Machal Ben Drusai, because we're not worried you're going to start playing with the fire after the point of Machal Ben Drusai. Shechoshes Lepseda that Sali Shlo Yisrach Islo Yischarech. Because you're worried that you're going to burn it otherwise. Kevek shekar nitzla kamachal ben drusai is already minimally cooked. If you then really hasten the process by making the fire greater, you'll have a good chance of burning it. So people don't want to take that chance. Okay, let's keep going here. Actually, this is good. It's helpful to get all these data points down. It'll make sense in the Shulchan Aruch much more easily. We're talking about the meat of a shore. A shore is an ox, and an aiz again is a goat. Again, these are fully grown animals. Svir lahu la haramba the Rambam hamachaber the shari. Rambam and the Machaber think it's permissible kashu tuach petit as long as there's clay that around into the food is in the oven and the clay covers the openings. Mitam the vaday lo yiftach hatanur lechatuya because you're definitely not going to open it to stoke the coals. The yiftach hatanur because if you open the tanur, tikones haruach, the wind will go in, the cold air will enter. V'yiskasha basar and the meat will get hard. And even if maybe by the way to hit this point, even if the fire is doing what it's trying to roast, when you don't have it's not hot enough, it's just not going to get there. The meat will just harden. V'yipased and it will be. You'll lose the meat, basically. It's not going to be edible. If the roast is sitting in a pot. So what do we call this? Could go on slikot the kedar. Pot roast. Okay. If you have a pot roast, so it's in a pot, but it's not really a liquid medium here, right? So the az ena miskasha. Apparently it doesn't get hard if the cold air comes on in. If it's totally raw. Shari, therefore it is permissible if it's raw. Kamosha Kosav narration on Gimel. Again, this only is if it's roasting over an open fire. If it's in a pot, we're talking about a pot roast. So what will happen, obviously, naturally, the pot roast, my guess, I'm not an expert on this one, the juices of the meat will flow to the bottom of this pot. And so it's not truly like a roasting situation over the open fire where everything drips out, and therefore it's just a completely dry situation. It will turn into a more liquidy situation in short order. Where did I get? In the special, so I feel hutzli kedar, right? If it's cooked a little bit, if it's only cooked a little bit, even if it's a pot roast, Yesh lachosh pen yiftach atanar v'yichate. But if it's a little cooked, it's not raw, but it's not machal ben rusai, but it's somewhere in between. So then we're worried you will stoke the coals because the cold air rushing in will not affect this quite as much. I'm not an expert in why that's the case, and therefore you're not allowed to have this situation entering Shabbos, even with the covering there. Because it's realistic to think that somebody might uncover it based on their cooking instincts because they want to hasten the cooking process for Friday nights. And it's already a little bit cooked. Not kamachal ben rusai, but a little bit cooked.
The pot itself will retain heat. That's the point.
Okay. So the pot will retain the heat and thus it'll be able to fend off some of the cold air that's entering into the situation.
Pot as opposed to an oven.
An oven that's sort of nicknamed a kedera, as opposed to like a tanur and akira and a kofach. Yeah, I think here, so I think it's talking about a pot roast. I feel pretty confident about that. Okay. Okay, fine. Ulefiza, according to this, Hadam Mishani, there when it answers, the Gemara says, Hasan Bisre Agumre. We're talking about meat that's right over the fire. It's right on top of the coals. We'll see in Sivbeis, the B'ki Gavna, in that situation, we're not worried about burning the meat in that situation. We are concerned that it will roast quickly. And since it's on top of the fire, he says, what's the real concern here? The real concern about on top of the fire is that it will roast so quickly, and it's not machal ben drusai. Unless it's already machal ben drusai, then I'm not going to play with it because it'll burn. But if it's so early in the process, making the fire a little bit bigger will help cook it, and it won't necessarily burn the way it would if it was already partially cooked. When it arrives at the point of machal ben drusai, then of course everybody agrees that it will be permissible to enter Shabbos at that particular juncture. Okay, good. Okay. It says, that it will help us explain all the Shulchan Aruch's thing. It doesn't help us with the Ramah. Now we have different, people, different thought processes. The Ramah is going to quote the Rosh and the Tur, not surprising. Those are Ashkenazi Gedolim, not the Rambam. Machaber likes the Rambam. They all pick their hometown favorites. Iker Tama Deshari Begadi. The reason Gedi is allowed. There is a different reason why Gedi is allowed, which will render a different halacha, because the reason here is going to matter. So the reason that Gedi is allowed, Mishum de Kashele Zika, that's because when the wind rushes in, the cold air rushes in, Velo Megale Kisui Shel Tanur, Iker Tama the Shari the Mishum Bigdi Mishum the Kashele Zika Velo Megale Kisui Shel Tanur, and I therefore I'm not going to uncover the that which is covering the oven right now, because if I do, my Gedi won't cook. Shari, that's going to be permissible, because no one would ever uncover the Gedi in the cooking process. Even if the oven is covered, but there's no clay part. So I put a board over it, but there's no seal from the clay, which would stop me from, give me more thought to break a seal as opposed to just pulling a board off the top of the hole where there's a hole, let's say, in the oven. That's still allowed as long as there's some sort of covering. Why? It actually doesn't say why, but the answer is going to be, the reason is because I would never do that from a cooking perspective. The cold air will rush in and ruin my gedi. If in a situation of a goat, lo shari eladavka kashu tuach betit saviv hakisui. That's only going to be allowed if I have the clay molding at the corners to ensure that this board, let's say, that's there, is more firmly on there. Because in that kind of situation, there I'm less concerned about stoking the coals, about playing with the fire. I'm not going to break the steel seal and start playing with it. That's around the oven. Here it sounds like he's saying the whole thing about the clay is that it's a reminder to me. I'm not going to start peeling the clay off, and we're working so hard. My high time, for this reason, sharia filu, even if it's in a pot, where maybe it can cook it'll cook for Friday night, and it's whatever the reason, no problem. No one's going to play with the clay. So what do you do with the answer about the reason that the meat is not allowed in the case of the Mishnah says ein sol and basar, because which is a case where it's right over the top of the coals. That's when it's not covered at all. There's not just the clay. There's no covering at all. Elahu pasuach legamre. This meat is the oven is completely accessible. And therefore, even by a gedi, according to the Ashkenazi reading of this Gemara, we're not going to allow it because it's so easy to play with the fire. It's right there. Mihu kishum machal ben drusai. But if it's machal ben drusai, not just raw, it's machal ben drusai as shari gam l'dei rishon. Again, everybody thinks it's fine, even according to the first opinion of the two opinions we saw in Reish and Gimel. And even if it's placed next to on the coals, if it's not on the coals, but even just next to the coals, when you have a roasting situation, let's pass machal ben drusai, and it's not on the oven, not on the fire, so you might actually think you'll play with the fire because it's next to the fire, in which case it'll hasten the cooking process but not burn it. A lot of details here. He says here, so there we're not worried you're going to play with the fire. This is our way of understanding the Mechaber and the Ramah, and we'll go over things we go over it again, but that is the introduction here to this siman. So again, it's all based on how to read the Gemara. That's where this argument stems from. What's the reason for the abisra de gumre, the meat that's over the coals? Why is that not allowed? What is the situation? Ramah is going to say has to do with the fact that the oven is completely exposed. The Shulchan Aruch is going to take that position. No, it's on the fire, and therefore you're a kind of person who doesn't care about burnt meat. So once you start having different reasons for something, then when you apply it to other situations, you may get different conclusions based on the situation. So let's read now the Shulchan Aruch with that very lengthy introduction in mind. Even though, as we discussed in the previous simon, raw meat is permissible to do shahiyah with this. Okay, to have it cooking from before Shabbos into Shabbos. Sorry, to place it in a cooking situation right before Shabbos. It's raw. Honey mile, when is it allowed? We're going to limit it b'kedera, according to the Shulchan Aruch, when it's in a pot, meaning not over an open fire, not a roasting situation. Aval b'tzali, in the case of roasting, she'etz al ha'esh, which is next to the fire, asur lahanicho samuch l'chashecha, that you're not allowed to put right on the fire right before Shabbos. Again, if you want to, if it's machal ben drusai, it's fine. But right before Shabbos, you cannot set up a situation where something is roasted, raw meat is roasting into Shabbos. Why? Because that will hasten the cooking. If it's roasting over an open fire, it will cook very quickly, and therefore I may come to stoke the coals. Further clarification: v'hanei mile b'bisar shor oez. This whole limitation of roasting applies when you're talking about the meat of an ox or a goat. That we're talking about a goat or fowl, so chicken here, or apropos to what we're coming to, turkey. Okay, it's in the category of fowl, I believe. Which are separated, the limbs are separated from it, meaning you're cooking smaller pieces of meat here. You imagine the picture, the classic picture of a roast with the whole goat is cooking with the apple in its mouth, and you're kind of turning it around and around. You don't do that with a chicken, right? Nobody does that with a chicken or even a baby goat. That you talk about the mamish, the real behemoth, the big one. Here, this is separated into its parts. Turducken, the John Madden, the turducken, right?
Wait a minute, they sell barbecued chickens all the time.
The
It's a whole chicken that's on a spit.
Right. It's true. Here, I don't know. Maybe it'll make a difference. Here, we'll look in the shulchan and actually, it'll make a difference. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah is going to point out here if it's whole instead of in fourths or in eighths, to quote the label at Seasons. That might make a difference here. So if it's in pieces, so mutter, that is permissible. Why? Well, it's an open fire. What's going on here? We're not worried. You're going to stoke the coals. You'll burn it if you do that. It'll leave the category of roasting, and it enters. That's not called roasted meat. That's called burnt meat now. Okay. It needs heat. It needs to cook a little bit, but it needs a gentle heat, not an aggressive flame. Let's read till the Rama. If the oven is covered with the clay molding, so it's holding whatever the cover is in place. Whether the gedi, the baby goat, and the fowl are whole. Bein bisar shor oez, right? Meaning, because if it's whole, it's different than when it's cut up. We'll see as Hinda was alluding to. Whether we're talking about meat of an ox or a goat, so we're talking about fully grown animals here. Mutter. The lo chashin lechituya. If it's covered, we're not worried. You're going to stoke the coals. It's because why? If you open the oven up, the and you start playing with the fire, the cold air will sweep in, and it will cool down the oven. The meat will get hard, and you'll lose the meat. Again, that was uniquely to the Shulchan Aruch's approach of how to read and understand this whole situation. Let's look at the Mishnah Berurah's comments on the Shulchan Aruch. Probably at that point we'll have to stop and we'll do the Ramah next week. But let's fully understand the Shulchan Aruch's comments. Aleph, muter lahashos. Okay, there's a review, right? Raw meat, Generally speaking, you're allowed to do shehiyah with raw meat. Hainu, sif katan aleph. Hainu shemutar litein lechatchila v'hashhoso al gabe kira v'tanur afilu im einam grufim uktumim. It is permissible, lichatchila. No qualms about this. To do shahiyah on a kira or at a tanur, even if they're not garu fakatum, you haven't raked the coals, you haven't put ashes on the coals. To kevan shu chai, because it's raw. The Gemara says masiach datu menu min ad lamachar. You forget about this till tomorrow. I have nothing to do with this until tomorrow. What I do tonight is not going to help anyways. Uvachol halayla yachol hisbasha b'lochitui, and it can cook all night and be ready tomorrow without me playing with the fire. As we talked about, chaniskal b'reish and reish begin. Okay, sifkat and beis aval b'tzali. If it's roasting, it's a problem. Afilu im tzola etz hatzali batan, or even if it's roasting in the oven, right? So it's not open, just an open fire. It's roasting. It's a dry heat. Dry heat. That's why I said if you're using a barbecue, that to me is the equivalent of this. You have a dry heat. By the way, sometimes even on the some fancier barbecues I've seen, they have like little section that goes right across the. You could put things on, so it's not even directly on top of the grates, but it's a little bit high, whatever, But if you think about the coal barbecues, and I forget the gas ones for a second, right? The old fashioned, like a tripod stand, and you put the coals in, and you have the grate. This is what we're talking about. You can't do this. That's not okay. But tanur mechusa, that's why that's even worse. This here we're talking about a tanur, which I think is more like the gas grills of today. But tanur mechusa. Even if the tanur is covered, but it's not covered, it doesn't have a clay molding to ensure that it won't be opened. We're worried you'll open it and you'll start playing with the fire. This is as opposed to pot roast. Dino kedera, that's like a pot. And therefore it will be permissible if it's raw. The chaber, because I guess it also slow the cooking process down. Pot roast is won't cook as quickly as a roast. Again, its own juices will come out, and it will be cooking now in more liquid medium, which will slow the process. So the mechaber excludes this as well. If you put it directly over the fire, then that's not okay. The shama filu b'visar gedi aser. There, even by a goat, we say the mechaber says it's not okay because it's right over the fire. And there we'll talk about it in a sif beis why if it's right over the fire that even a pot roast is going to be a problem. Right over the fire is going to be an issue. Okay, and so we will get to that. I'm just trying to look here. These are we talking about that here? Looking at sif beis here for a second. Right, so you put it on the chalim and choshal sheet salam meherav avlios hilka chashin shem yichad avakishin nitzav marlon chashin. Right. Okay. All right. We'll get to it there. Okay. All right. We'll talk about that. The bottom line is that the mechaber himself, I think he's saying that the pot roast is a problem. Even in that situation, don't read that differently. That's how I would read that. If you have a different, even the pot roast is a problem. It's dafka right over the fire. Okay. What was that?
Why would that be?
Yeah, sham afilu b'vasar gadi, even by a. Right. Why is that? On the sif beis, ayin shamatam. In sif beis, he says that there are two reasons you can't roast meat on Shabbos if it's unless it's machal ben drusai. Even if it's Basar Gadi, the Kevin Shinichal Gabi Gacham, and it's right on top of the coals, Eino Choshesh Elashi Tzala Mahera, we're worried that it's gonna roast quickly. Even though it'll burn. So I guess we are worried that you will stoke the coals even though it will burn. I guess if it's over the fire, unless this is not talking about the pot roast. Maybe it's just saying it's Eitala Eish. Oh, okay, sorry, I read it incorrect. Okay. Thank you. The case here is mentioned Eitzel Eish. Eitzel Eish is not on top of the fire, it's near the fire. So all he's saying is here that on the fire will also be a problem. Even though you're like, oh, but you'll burn it. But we're worried that if it's over open fire, even though it's gonna burn maybe a little bit, you're gonna still fiddle with the coal. That's why Basar Gadi over a direct fire, as we talk about in the introduction. Over an open direct fire is still a problem because you might still be tempted to play with the fire, and therefore it will, even though it might burn a little bit, you're weighing getting it done fast versus burning it here, potentially burning it, so you might take that chance. So that's why it's not just near the fire, but even on the fire is going to be a problem. That has nothing to do with pot roast. Pot roast is fine, right? No problem with pot roast. Okay. Let's go to Sif Katan Dalet. We have to stop after that. Asur lahanicho, that it is not permissible to place it there. Im lo sheyesh shehus mi ba'od yom liyos nitzla, unless there's enough time before the Shabbos starts for it to be roasted. Kolkach sheyim mitztamek v'ralo, to the point where it's basically fully roasted, and it would be mitztamek v'ralo. The continuation of this roasting would be actually a bad thing for this food. But who there that's according to the first opinion. Remember the first opinion in Rishon and Gimel, which we don't pass them like. I don't know what the Sephardim do. I don't know if they follow the first or second opinion. But that first opinion would say that you cannot cook anything. Sorry, you cannot do shehiyah unless it's fully cooked. And it's mitztamek v'ralo, so then it's not good for the continuation of it is not good, but at least I keep it hot. But it may dry out a little bit. That was the first opinion. According to the second opinion, which we follow, once you get to Machal ben Drusai, this would kick in. Right? Well, as he says here, Sham Sagi Mitzlami Be'ojom Machal ben Drusai. As long as it's roasted to the minimally edible state of Machal ben Drusai, then no worries, no fears at all. Everything goes away. All the problems go away here. Let me just do one last one here because that'll finish the sentence. Shemamaher lehis bashel, it will hasten the cooking. Kasu hachronos in Rishon Gimel, the Rachronim wrote in the previous simon, and this is very important. The mine kitnios, legumes. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's different shinui nischos. Legumes or legumes? I don't know. Legumes. You say legumes.
No, I say legumes.
Legumes, yeah. And then my kids at school correct me. It's legumes, Rabbi Klinger. I said, okay, whatever. Virakot. Or vegetables, ushar dvarim rachim, soft foods. Afilu b'kedera. Oh, it's in a pot. It's in a liquid medium. No problem. You can't do that. Mimaharin lehis bashel. It will cook pretty quickly. V'alken afilu chai. You throw in raw vegetables into a cholent 3 minutes before Shabbos starts. It's a veggie cholent though, no meat. Veggie cholent. Shema there, Chashidan Bahan Shema Yechat. We are worried you'll stoke the coals. The meat, that'll take too long to cook. You're gonna play with the fire, won't help you. The vegetables, they're raw. If you hasten, if you work on the flame to make it larger, you can cook the vegetables in a much shorter period of time. I think that's a indisputable fact. Vegetables don't take as long to cook as meat. And so he says, take a look at Sif Chet later on in the Ver Halacha Sham. So again, this het there only applies to raw meat, and we're already limiting it to certain circumstances. But if you have raw vegetables, that does not help you. That does not help you at all. That's why if you want a mostly veggie cholent, and it's right before Shabbos, take one piece of meat, put it in the cholent. The Gemara says explicitly that one piece of meat makes the whole situation mutter. Doesn't have to be like a certain rove or a certain one piece. The Gemara literally says throw shadeh, just throw in a piece of meat, good to go. And then we have mostly vegetarian cholent in the sense of not halachically vegetarian cholent, it's a fleishik cholent, but it's a mostly vegetarian cholent that you, because you forgot before Shabbos on Friday to get it ready with enough time. By the way, this whole thing is funny because there is another way this is all permissible. If you do grufo ketuma, then even if the food is not machal ben drusai, it's permissible to leave it cooking into Shabbos. Shehi is allowed if you have grufa ketuma. When do you not eat grufa ketuma? When it's kamachal ben drusai. So what's at stake here in some ways is the crock pot. Do you cover the knobs or do you not cover the knobs? If the dial, if it's between raw and machal ben drusai, if it's raw, okay, then you don't need anything. If it's kamachal ben drusai, you don't need anything. If it's in the little window between raw and machal ben drusai, that's where you need to cover the dial, because that's our modern day version of grufo ketuma. If you do that, you never have to worry about any of these calculations. But again, you don't need to do it. And perhaps you don't rather not start fidgeting and covering the knobs. But again, I always recommend to people, you might want to do it anyways, because if you want to do chazara with a crock pot, you have that option now if it's grufo ketuma. Whereas if you don't have that, once you take it off, you can't do chazara. Okay, so we'll pause here in the middle of the Mishnah Berurah's comments on the Shulchan Aruch. We'll finish those next week, and we'll take a look at the Ramah's opinion. He does have a little bit of a different understanding of the halacha, and then we'll keep going from there. We'll talk about what happens if you have raw fruit and it's near the stove. We'll talk about if there's bread in the oven. That's they used to have bread that was stuck to the oven, and in order to, they would do ridia. They would kind of peel it off the sides of the oven. So we'll talk about bread and other foods and situations. They didn't bring up fish. I would assume that fish is more like a category of the vegetables. I feel like it can cook pretty quickly.
I wonder whether it's all home.
They talk a lot about pickling the fish, right? But they probably cooked it. I think roasted, cooked. This one they probably cooked it also. But you're right. Maybe they like that. Herring is herring is just raw fish that's pickled, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Probably depending on what kind of fish we're talking about here. All right, for those of you watching on Zoom, thanks for